Welcome back. Today we are going to talk a little bit about a Bogen PA amp and its conversion into a pretty killer guitar amp. As you'll notice in the title that I put on, this started out as a church amp, likely headed for the dumpster, and I was able to grab this and make something that's a pretty killer rock amp, based loosely on what's called Slash's AFD, or Cascaded Plexi. Before I go into this, I just want to give a quick shout out to Rob Robinet. The guy has probably the best tube amp website on the planet. If you have not checked it out, I highly suggest you jump over there. You'll see the link here, and also it'll be down in the liner notes. Thanks, Rob. This is the stock schematic for the Bogen Cha33, and although I'm sure it was great as a PA, I did make some changes, and they were going to be so many that I really just wound up gutting the amp and building it the way I wanted to follow more the topology of the rock amps that we know. With that being said, we might as well go through some of the features and look at a little bit about how this amp was designed. After all, it lasted a long time and was still in working order when I got it. Just to quickly discuss something interesting about this amp and its original schematic, it actually runs dual 5Y3s. Now I think this is done because the secondary voltage, as listed here, is 390 volts. Really it's about 400 in today's electricity. And I'm not sure that a single 5Y3 would be able to handle that. And as shown here in the power section, it actually has a paraphase phase inverter, which for its application worked really well, although it's not really something we now see in the guitar amps. The other 2 points of interest are that it uses a 6AV6 as one of the preamp tubes, and the tone circuit is more of a Bandaxle or James tone stack. Again, not something that we're used to seeing in our modern tube amps from Fender and Marshall. And although that led to a very nice, clean, almost empty layout inside, it really didn't give me the amp that I thought I would want to build, especially based on my previous builds and knowing what I wanted to do next. So this is the circuit that I came up with, and just in case anyone's interested, I used the DigiKey website to draw out this schematic. I found that the other software such as DIYLC has been a little bit buggy lately, and this thing works amazingly. So if you're looking for a way to draw out a schematic, you might want to head over to DigiKey's site. So now to talk really quickly about what is in this schematic. First, it's good to keep in mind that I was chasing the tone that Slash has on the AFD amp, and also factoring in all the valuable information that Rob gives on his site about cascading multiple stages together, effectively getting you to where Marshall landed with the JCM 800. To accomplish this, the starting point, just as it is for all of the Marshalls, is the 59 bassman. In that, I make sure to use the long tail pair phase inverter and also the TMB tone stack. I also work with the existing 5881 tubes. As far as filtering and rectifying goes, I use the same network that's in the bassman, and I added a choke, and finally there's a presence control. Moving down the line more into the Marshall topology, I went ahead and added a third 12AX7 in place of that 7-pin tube. I throw in a pre-phase inverter master volume like the JCM 800, and I put in an adjustable bias, and the source of that bias voltage is actually coming from the high voltage tap on the transformer. Finally, we can discuss the mods that I did, starting with the channel jumper switch, where basically I switch in the cold clipper stage from the JCM 800. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The second is that I added a Type 3 master volume. This is nice to have because it basically gives you an attenuator. It cancels out the phase on the tubes at the end. After that, I added in a triode, standby, and pentode switch. Now this allows you to go back and forth from triode to pentode mode, and since the standby is in the center, you're not worrying about blowing up any of the tubes. And then the last two pieces are the nice to haves. The first being that I added bias test jacks just to make it easier to test the bias if I'm changing the tubes or need to set it up. And finally, there is a three-way negative feedback switch where you basically have the baseman, none, or the Marshall. So as I said, for the phase inverter and power amp section, I copied the baseman. It seems to be tried and tested, and very happy with it. Same goes for the rectification and bias portion. Everything here basically follows the baseman with the exception that there are dual rectifier tubes and that there is a bias tap, which is adjustable, going a little bit more with the Marshall topology. And the last section here is where I actually show the switching of the extra tube stage for the preamp so it can be cascaded in. And you can see that it's off to the side there. I really just followed the exact topology and attenuator circuit of what you'd see in a Marshall. I had to do a little bit of an adjustment in terms of the way that I biased the preamp tube. You'll notice that the cathode has a 4.7K and 0.68 microfarad bypass. This is a little different than the way that Marshall does it with the 10K and no bypass cap. And now for some photos of what everything looks like inside. You'll notice point-to-point wiring doesn't quite come out as neat as using the eyelet board. The first picture here is the entire layout on the inside. Next up is the preamp and the filtering. You see how I had to put in some tag strips there and throw in the 22 microfarad caps. And finally over to the power amp side and the phase inverter. You'll see here that I had to shoehorn a lot of things in, including the bias pot and the bias shunt resistors, but it did work out pretty nice. Again, like I said, it's pretty tight in there. If you're going to do one of these builds, be aware of that. Do some planning before you just start soldering things in. Here's a closer view of that bias pot and those shunt resistors that I mentioned. On the other side of the shunt resistors, I have those jacks up on the top, which you'll see in a later picture. And so now some exterior views. Here's from the top. You can see the tube layout there. This is a nice one of the front panel, and as I zoom in here, you can see the bias pot and the three test jacks, red, black, and blue. And of course, the dual 5Y3s are sitting there. Here's the back side. Not too deep of a picture, but we'll see more of that later on. And now for some sound samples. I'm going to do a quick dirty one here, and then you'll be able to hear my friend Matt kind of rip through there, and you'll be able to tell the difference between the Plexi and the AFD channel. The AFD channel being that you don't have to have it fully maxed out to have something amazing. Basically as if you've stomped on a tube screamer. Again, you'll have to excuse my crappy playing. I basically have it dimed. And now into the studio where my buddy Matt Nervette can actually show this thing off and crank it a bit. Let's see what you think. I should mention he's just playing straight through the amp, no effects. Well, that about does it. Thanks for watching. Sorry I don't have any follow-ups that are really cool like Uncle Doug or some of the others. And I will try to get more videos out soon.